Welcome back to 40 Real Estate, Chapter 23, Lecture 5, Part 1. Today we'll be going over a overview of Module 3, which we are finishing up the rest of this class, last 2 weeks, and then Chapter 23. So Module 3, we'll be going over the remaining chapters 23, 25, and 18. However, there's additional information which will be provided through video lectures and text, predominantly dealing with valuation and appraisal. So the finishing of our discussion here will largely deal with condominiums and separated apartment buildings and unit and dwellings, appraisals, valuations, and the investments in real estate through REITs. Then we'll finish off with a collapse of the 2008 crisis, and we'll be doing our valuations in Excel. So we'll be releasing to you your Excel assignment here shortly as well. Okay, chapter 23 is pretty short, and it just deals with condominiums and PUDs and timeshares. So condominiums are multi-family living dwellings and also are PUDs and timeshares. What they allow you to do is get a lot of people living in a small amount of space, which creates a very high density living area, reduces the amount of land that has to be provided for, and also reduces the cost of living, the time associated with maintenance of the property, construction costs since you can build multiple units on top of each other, and share multiple common things like buildings and water lines. And they also reduce the use of spare land, which could be used for more appropriate things such as agriculture or industrial uses. So ownership rights are separated along the property lines in the air, and these multifamily units give fee simple ownership to air blocks or cubicle blocks, and not necessarily ownership of the land beneath it, depending on whether it's a condominium or cooperative or timeshare agreement, or however you've structured it as far as ownership, depending on the type. And there can be tax benefits which allow ownership of real property in deducting taxes for your mortgage payments, which don't occur for rent. So condominiums are a nice way of dealing with the tax benefits of ownership when you don't simply want to rent an apartment. So what is a condominium? Condominium is simply a separate ownership of a cubicle of area, and on many units are going to be placed on a single plot of land. And in most states, these are governed by what is known as a Horizontal Property Act or a Condominium Act. And all this says is that you own a specific cubicle of land that's in the air, and you also own an undivided interest in the shell of the building and the land the building is built upon. And there's also a governing association that will help decide any of the rules that are part of the condominium itself, and also how those rights of the common areas are going to be divided. So are we going to paint the common areas pink, for example? That will have to be decided by a consortium of all of the owners in the condominium, which basically means the condo association. So if you purchase a condominium, you automatically become a member of the condo association, and you may run to become a member of the board if there are quite a lot of individuals on the association. They may select a small sample to actually do the governing of that, which would be the board. As I said before, in every condominium, there's going to be common elements such as the foyer, the walk-in area, the elevator, the outside of the building, any parking lots. These are all common elements to the condo association ownership. You own your individual condo, and then the condo association is in charge of governing the common areas or common elements. However, everybody in the condominium has an undivided ownership right in the common areas. So even though you own your individual condo, you also own part of the common area. A limited common element is where there's clear ownership that is undivided, but the use of that area is limited, and this typically is relegated to parking spots. So everybody in the condominium owns an undivided interest in the parking lot itself, but then you divide up the use rights for specific sections of that area for parking purposes, and that's a limited common element. Typically, these condos associations are going to come with a homeowners association, which is going to do the governing of all of these individuals. And when a developer goes on and tries to build a condominium, they will have to do a condominium subdivision document, which is pretty similar to any of the subdivision documents we described before, where they have to actually map out where all of these plots are going to go. In the case of a condominium, they need to map out where each of the condos are going to be. So this is going to be condo number 22 A, and this is going to be this section of the building. It's going to be on the second floor. It'll be 600 square feet, etc., etc., etc. This is known also as the master deed, because remember that this is built on one section of land, and so there's a single master deed and yet many divisible deed ownership documents for each section of cubicle airspace that is going to be sold. So the document will also legally establish that owner's association, and that owner's association is really going to be a non-for-profit entity, although it could be for profit. It'll be set up as a corporation, and it's just there to protect the rights and property values of all the other owners in the association. Okay, so again, as I said, if you purchase a condominium, you automatically become part of the owners association. Even if you're not going to be on the board of directors, which does the governing of it, you automatically become an owner of that association itself. And you're going to pay dues that are fees in managing the association, which could be reserved if they needed to make repairs for something coming down the line, so they need to replace the roof of the condominium. Well, everybody has to participate in replacing the roof. They all have to pay their fair share. So instead of charging everyone a few $100s immediately, you may charge them a small amount over the next 10 years, which is how long it takes for the roof to depreciate completely. You may also have to pay for grounds maintenance. You may have to pay for window washing, all sorts of just cleaning and maintaining of the building, and these get charged on a monthly basis. They can be incrementally for the cost only a few dollars, but they typically add up to being several $100s a month. So $300 to $400 in condo association fees is not uncommon in today's environment. So if you're looking to purchase a condo and you already are going to get a mortgage on that condo for, say, $1,100, and that's well within your budget, make sure you are adding on the condo association fees, which could add $200 to $400 additional dollars per month, which may take you well out of budget in what you can afford as far as condos are concerned. Now, the condos association is going to be governed by a set of bylaws, which dictate to the board of the association what they can and cannot do, and the rights of each individual in that association as to what they can and cannot do, and what the board can do to either remediate any infractions or fine that individual, or in some cases, depending on how binding the bylaws are, actually physically remove any alterations that are made. Typically, the bylaws will not allow alterations or will not be able to stop an individual from making alterations to the inside of the condo units unless that alteration would be structural in nature. So you can't remove a load-bearing wall because that might cause a lack of stability on the condo that's above you. But if the wall is considered to be non-load-bearing, you can probably fix around it. However, you're probably not going to be allowed to change a window fixture, which would have an effect on the outside appearance of the condo unit and therefore would need approval by the condo association. And because it would simply look not similar to all the other ones, they're probably going to deny that request. So these associations are fairly powerful. They are legally enforceable. Many times homeowners end up coming into condo units and they have a to hell with the association idea, and they get into crosshouse of the association and they end up losing in court, and thereafter they're on the kind of hit list for the association board members thereafter, which is not a nice place to be. So for example, if you're on good terms with the board association and there is a fine for leaving trash out the front of your door instead of taking it down to the trash bin, they're likely to waive the fine and just say don't do it again. But if you leave the trash out and you are on the bad list of people they do not want to deal with, you're a persona non grata, you may get fined, and you may be fined with an escalation, so they'll just increase the fee the second time you do it. And that's because you've upset someone or made the association feel as if they did not have any authority. So again, it's best to just understand that they have complete authority in common use areas. They are a formal association. It's not just a club, and they do have legitimate legal power associated with managing the condo units. PUDs, okay, are where you're going to purchase your own home and your own land, but you're also going to buy into some use of community property, such as a community pool or a clubhouse, maybe golf house, green courts, or a private lake. Okay, I have lake there, but a private lake. Okay, you may have exclusive use rights to that lake or to docks on the lake. And these are all things that you are going to end up buying into And condos associations or just associations of the PUD are also going to exist, and they were going to lay down covenants, conditions, and restrictions. This is a set of deed restrictions which are going to make it so that you must get approval or you must keep the property up to certain conditions and standards which have been agreed to by the community. And these are typically gated communities or very, very nice communities, country clubs, which give amenities to these homeowners which you would not usually have, or it would be very expensive to maintain on a one per person, one household basis. So many people can enjoy these nice, luxurious amenities and share them, but with that gain of sort of freedom, you give up some other freedoms as your personal use of your property. You will not be able to paint the property whatever you like. It has to stay within certain conditions. In some places, depending on where you are, this can actually restrict the type of building that you can build. So in certain PUDs in the Northeast, for example, you have to build a style of house known as Nantucket coastal style. Okay, and this is like a very gray wood paneling with white accents, white gable accents. And it's a very distinct style, and this style also exists in North Carolina in the Outer Banks. So some communities, you can only build in this style. In other areas, you can only build in paint in coral. For example, some sections of Florida and South Carolina have PUDs where you must paint the color of the house in a coral color. Okay, or I don't mean to say coral pink exactly, but a pastel coral color. So it could be yellow, it could be light blue, it could be light pink. And this is sort of to maintain a sort of a bit of a tropical beach feel for that community as a whole. But these CCRs can be extremely restrictive. In many cases, it dictates you must mow your grass on a weekly basis during the months of March to August. That is when grass grows the most. And you must use a watering system on your property just to make sure that the grass remains green and doesn't turn yellow. So these can be very restrictive and can be expensive for you to be in compliance with. However, they often come with fees which would make it even more expensive if you were not in compliance. So it's important when you read your PUDs, if you're going to buy into a PUD in a country club, for example, read the documents, make sure you understand what you are buying into, and then read the CCRs or CC and Rs to make sure that you can afford any of those covenants and restrictions. Last I'm going to go talk about is timesharing. So resorts are often built, and they're fairly expensive real estate projects that go on. And what you do there is they're going to build a large hotel effectively, or some single family dwellings, or sometimes duplex dwellings, where they can sell these units to individuals for a fraction of ownership in a year. So they're selling time, not actual ownership to the land property itself. You do get a deed and you do get fee simple ownership rights, but what you are buying is a portion of time use in the building. Okay? So you buy typically a week of use per year, and that's a single ownership unit in timesharing. That ownership unit in timesharing is a specific week per year as well. So you can buy the second week of December, and therefore you always have access to use this property on the second week of December every year that you hold the deed. Okay? You haven't sold it to anybody else, therefore you get to use that building the second week of December every year. Nobody else can use the building, only you. Now, as you can imagine, if you want to visit the same place every year in the second week of December, or fourth week of December in most cases, for example, for Christmas vacation, it might be pretty useful if you really always wanted to visit the same place every year. But most people do not want to visit the same place every year. So these used to be very common in the boomer generation because visiting the same vacation spot every year was quite common. But today people are a little bit more adventurous and they like to move around. So it has become increasingly commonplace that people enter into exchange services for timeshares. And what that allows you to do is to take your timeshare ownership right and transfer it to another person. So somebody else maybe wants to use your property during the second week of December, and you say, that's fine. Just the association gives me a credit system points or gives me the right to use your property during the second week of December. And it might seem nice instead, let's say that you had a timeshare in Florida during the second week of December, and this other individual had Big Bear Lake in California, which is a nice little resort community in California in the mountains there. And you say, we'd like to switch. So all you're doing there is switching location. You're not switching the time use itself of the timeshare, but the condo association, timeshare exchange associations have gotten a little bit smart, and they've said, well, we can just bank point systems which indicate the amount of time that you're giving up per year that other people are using your property, and perhaps there's so many people in this association that we could spend the points on some other units like you would a hotel. So the Timeshare Use Association and the exchange services they've created have almost allowed sort of this large network of hotels, very nice hotel systems, like individual condos that you basically prepay. And that's the idea behind timeshares today. This large network of very nice kept condos and hotel exchange services that are prepaid at a deed basis. The general average cost of a week of timeshare units ownership is about $14,000 per week of ownership. Keep in mind that you are buying ownership for that entire week for the rest of your life, okay, as long as you own that deed right. You will pay a maintenance fee that is associated with maintaining the property, which runs about $200 to $500 per week of ownership that you're purchasing, or it can be quite more expensive than that. And that allows you to use the property anytime during the year, and you have a week's worth of, say, points or that specific week of use if you so choose. And again, you can move these all around the United States if you want, and it can really save you on hotel costs. But you have to make sure that you use it. It's a if you don't use it, you lose it system. So if you're going to make the investment of $14,000 or more, then you had better make sure that you are going to use the timeshare time, or the investment may become unworthwhile. The argument goes this: if you were to pay for a hotel for a week for the same standard of living you could obtain in owning a timeshare, you might have to pay, say, between $100 and $200 a night in that hotel. For the same week of use, that's anywhere between $700 to $1,400 in a week of time. Within about 10 to 20 years of using your timeshare use, you may save money by entering into a timeshare agreement, provided you didn't use a mortgage to pay for the timeshare, you just paid up front in cash. Then you may actually save money after 10 to 20 years of owning the timeshare. However, the fact of the matter is most people do not stay in hotels which are $100 to $200 in value per night, and secondarily, most people do not make full use of their timeshare units, because there's usually not fully undivided availability to use the units themselves. So for example, you may purchase a week of time, which is 7 days, but most people do not have 7 days of time available to take a vacation. Or there's not availability in any of the units to use a full 7 days, so they may only have maybe 3 days here, 4 days there for you to use your units or to use your time, and therefore you cannot fully consume the amount of time that you would have based on what amount of time you are allowed to take vacation. It can be difficult to use up all the time, and then it may be more expensive in the long run that you didn't use the timeshare to begin with than using a hotel. Or worst case, you own the timeshare, but you have to visit a place that doesn't have timeshare units there, and therefore you have to get a hotel anyway, and you save no money in the deal. So be very careful in your timeshare purchasing. Many timeshare programs will use very aggressive sales practices to get you to buy the property. And because of this, many states have initiated a cooling off period, which is a legal right to rescind a contract once you have purchased it for a specific period past the purchase date. This is usually only a few days, about a week. 5 days is the average, that you have the rescinding right, which means that if the person who was selling it to you just wouldn't let you leave the room unless you signed these contracts to buy this timeshare unit against your best wishes, and you signed them anyway just so you could get out of the room because they're being very, very pushy, very aggressive, then you basically have the right within 5 days to simply notify them that you no longer want the property and rescind the contract and demand your money back. And they can do nothing about it, okay? So this is a very keen tactic they use. Be very careful if you're going to go tour a timeshare property. They are very aggressive in how they try to get you to buy the property. Okay, guys, we'll be releasing your Excel here soon. Again, the remainder of these modules will be we have 2 more chapters, 25 and 18, and they will be doing valuation, which is just the mechanics of the class. This last third module, last 2 weeks. So this is the mechanics section of the course. A little bit of math here, nothing too difficult. It should be easy to handle. Have a good weekend.